Lorna Dane, the mistress of magnetism, is the second ever female to join the X-Men ranks. Fans often say that Lorna is a very underrated character, as she never quite got the screen time she truly deserved. But that doesn't make her any less cool of a character. So today, we'll look into the anatomy of Lorna, aka Polaris, and explain just why we think that she's one of the coolest characters ever. So strap in, get comfortable, and let's get down to business. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is Polaris? Is she really Magneto's daughter or not? Back in 1968, in the X-Men issue 49, Jim Steranko, Arnold Drake, and Don Heck introduced X-Men fans to a character that almost left most of us astounded. Introducing Dr. Lorna Dane. Standing at a height of 5'7", with striking emerald eyes and brown hair, one would simply think there was nothing more to her. But who would have guessed that this Lorna Dane is just another mutant like the X-Men? Lorna was the daughter of Susanna and Arnold, or so she thought. Actually, Susanna had a torrid love affair with a guy named Eric. And yes, if you're thinking that the name sounds familiar, you're right on the money. This Eric was none other than our mutant friend, Magneto. Magneto and Susanna's love affair was a well-hidden secret, or at least that's what Susanna thought. See, by the time Lorna was 3 years old, Arnold had somehow managed to figure it all out. So, he decided that he would take his family flying and confront Susanna in mid-air so that she would have nowhere to run. Needless to say, when the confrontation actually took place, both the parents got into a very heavy-handed argument. Neither of them had thought about Lorna, the young child who may have been a mutant. So imagine their surprise when their fight somehow managed to trigger Lorna's mutant abilities to finally flourish completely. Lorna was upset with the parents fighting, and as most children in this situation do, tried to calm them down. Instead, she herself got screamed at, which was a trigger enough for her to unleash an uncontrolled magnetic pulse. This pulse was enough to rip apart the plane, which led to the deaths of her parents. The uncontrolled nature of the pulse also gave her the iconic green hair that we know so well. But that's not the only thing that this magnetic pulse achieved. You see, this pulse was so strong that even Magneto managed to sense it. He tracked the pulse down to its origin and found out about his daughter. But seeing that she was a mere 3 years old, Magneto decided that she was not ready for the responsibilities that came with the power. Eric also knew that the life he would offer Lorna right now was not something that she deserved. So he made the best call that he could have. He asked his associate, Mastermind, to rewrite Lorna's memory. Lorna now knew that she lost her parents when her father, a pilot, somehow crashed the plane. With no memory of her powers, Lorna easily adjusted to her new life when she was adopted by her aunt, Arnold's sister, and her husband, taking their last name, Dane. Lorna knew that her green hair would make her stand out in the crowd often. So to prevent that, she often dyed her hair brown, making her look as normal as the rest of us. She also had some sort of genetic problems which prevented her mutant powers from manifesting in the later years. But Lorna finally found her true identity as a mutant when she was beckoned upon by Mesmero, who used his psyche generator to command all mutants in North America. This whole Mesmero incident led to her learning about the X-Men who showed up to save her. Eventually, Lorna joined the X-Men out of gratitude and wanting to do good. But later on, she quit the X-Men team to focus on her career in geophysics. Does she have a secondary mutation? When it comes to Lorna, her single mutation of being able to control the magnetic fields is not the only one she has. In fact, there was a secondary mutation within her that she had no idea about. Let me tell you about it. There was a sorceress in Savage Land known as Zaladane who knew that Lorna was her blood sister. Lorna was taken over by an incorporeal being known as Malice. This Malice character worked with Mr. Sinister as one of his marauders. Over the years, Malice had bonded with several major players of the X-Men, but the bond Malice had with Lorna was pretty striking. Lorna was not able to break away from Malice until Mr. Sinister's death, which weakened their bond. Lorna knew that even though the bond was weak, she needed some help to break away from it, so she reached out to the X-Men for help. However, before she could be rescued, she was kidnapped by the army of Savage Land. This army was led by Dane, the sorceress that I mentioned before. At first, the sorceress offered her to work with them, but when Lorna refused, Dane trapped her in a machine and took away all her powers. The procedure splits Lorna from Malice, finally ending their years-long bonding. While Lorna knew that she didn't have any magnetic abilities, her stature and physical strength increased quite a bit. This was rather odd, but it allowed her to help the X-Men to defeat the Savage Land people. After she got back to the X-Men headquarters, she regained her normal stature. Realizing that this was rather odd and might have some dangerous consequences eventually, Lorna reached out to Moira McTaggart, the only one who was qualified enough to give her an answer. After running a few tests, Moira was baffled by the results. Whenever Lorna activated her powers to grow bigger in size, the people around her would behave strangely. At first, Lorna thought everyone was doing so because they were stressed out themselves. But nope. Turns out, Lorna had a second mutation that turned her into the Nexus being of negative emotions. This status of being a nexus of negative emotions affected pretty much everyone around her, with no exceptions at all. It took her a while to figure out that the strength that she was so happy about was being drawn from the negative energies around her. While this power was cool enough, it landed her in quite a bit of trouble. Shadow King, the multiversal manifestation of the dark side of human consciousness, used Polaris' status as a nexus to come into this realm from the astral plane. He controlled Polaris and spread anger, hatred, and violence wherever they went. This connection between her and the Shadow King was finally broken by the X-Factor and X-Men. Once she was free of Shadow King's control, Lorna learned that Dane had been killed a while ago. With Psylocke using her neural disruptive psionic blade, Lorna's magnetic powers returned, and her ability to control the emotions of people around her was gone. While her secondary mutation is no longer in the picture, that doesn't mean that she can't have it again. I, for one, think it would be rather cool to see her work with her magnetic powers in combination with her ability to control the emotions of people around her. A pretty unique arsenal to have, in my opinion. Does she have powers like Magneto? Is she more powerful than Magneto? While it would be super cool to see Lorna and Magneto go toe-to-toe, I don't think that would be possible just yet. Lorna has similar abilities to Magneto, so in theory, she should be able to do everything that Magneto can do. But so far, Lorna has only manipulated magnetic, electrical, and gravitational fields. While Magneto has called upon huge amounts of energy, Lorna is yet to do that. We also don't know if she can lift as much as Magneto can using her powers. Lorna herself has never shown any interest in using her powers in combat situations, unlike her father, who's more than happy to do so. Since she never really does that, it would be a surprise to no one if we find out that she is simply not on the same level as her father. But that does not mean she can't do anything. The control that Lorna has over metals is extremely commendable. She can lift and manipulate the metals to her wishes. She can liquefy it with a mere thought and reconstruct the metal objects according to her will. One time, she took a bunch of silverware and turned it into a suit like Magneto's for herself. So you get the drift. She may not be as strong as him, but she definitely has the potential to be. She can absorb powerful mutants' energies. Lorna is a gift that just keeps on giving because these are not the only things she can do. Whenever she's around mutants who usually have some sort of energy attack, as long as the attack reaches her, she's able to absorb those as well. Like honestly, how cool is that? When Storm used her lightning blast, Lorna was able to absorb the energy from that and strengthen herself. Not just that, Lorna was also able to absorb energy from Cyclops' optic blast as well as Havoc's energy beam. By absorbing all the three forms of energies around her, Lorna became so powerful that she was able to lift the island of Krakoa from Earth and push it into space. Is she an Omega-level mutant? Lorna is not an Omega-level mutant. She's actually an Alpha mutant. For those who don't know, in the X-Men universe, mutants are classified into different levels to make it easier for us and the mutants to understand who they're going up against. An Alpha-level mutant is not as powerful as the Omega-level mutants, but they are quite strong by themselves. If these mutants wanted to cause chaos, you can be sure that they would wreak havoc with ease. The only thing that can be considered a limitation of an alpha mutant is that their powers do not reach the same stellar heights as the Omega levels. They are not omnipotent. Lorna is one such mutant. Her powers are nothing godlike at all, at least compared to numerous others from the mutant kind. However, that doesn't stop her from being an absolute badass whenever she's fighting. While Lorna was never quite into the eccentric life of heroes, she knows how to pull her weight when she's thrown into a fight. Even before she had ever tapped into the upper limits of her power, Lorna was strong enough to go against Jean Grey and Storm while being controlled by Eric the Red. But wait, that's not all. In recent years, she went up against Vulcan, the mad brother of Cyclops and Havoc. Vulcan is an Omega-level mutant, so going up against him was definitely not an easy feat for Lorna. But she did so with ease and grace. While she didn't win this fight, she left Vulcan quite injured since she used her powers to crush him completely while he was still wearing his armor. Lorna truly is the epitome of working smart. She can manipulate the energy forms. Lorna is her father's daughter when you look at the abilities that she has. Her connection with the electromagnetic field is exceptionally strong, even though it might not seem like it at first glance. Lorna is bound to the geomagnetic field present on Earth. She draws the energy from the Earth's electromagnetic field without even realizing it. The fact that she can draw powers from the Earth's magnetic field kinda makes sense when you look at her other powers. But this is not all. On top of being in sync with the electromagnetic field of Earth, Lorna is also able to control the electromagnetic spectrum that surrounds us. She can easily access energy waves of all lengths, from gamma, X-rays, and ultraviolet to visible light, including lasers and more. While it is true that she doesn't use them owing to her polar opposite nature from her father, it's no secret that her potential is comparable to her father's. While we're talking about her ability to control the energies of the spectrum, let me clarify something. I know we have another mutant who can control the frequency energy of the spectrum, Storm. When it comes to Storm, she can control almost all of the energies. Lorna, on the other hand, can do it but chooses not to. She mostly manipulates the electromagnetic spectrum, magnetic fields, and electricity. The limits of Lorna's powers have not been made clear-cut, which gives us fans the hope that maybe we'll see her use her powers and completely blow us away eventually. How does she become a horseman of apocalypse? Lorna had always dreamt of a simple life. She wanted to explore the world and see the beauty that this planet had to offer. But once her mutant powers manifested fully and she learned who she actually happened to be, she had to give up on those dreams of hers. Instead, she led a tumultuous and eccentric life full of being kidnapped, rescued, fighting, and being kidnapped again. And the cycle kept repeating itself. Her powers, which started this whole troubled experience for her in the first place, eventually became something that Lorna depended on a lot. That's why, right after the Day of M incident, when Lorna's powers were taken away, she couldn't quite fathom it at first. She had a hard time dealing with the fact that she no longer had her powers. But when she nearly died in combat, she decided that it was time to end this tomfoolery and accept that she no longer had her powers. But since she had no powers, her being a part of the X-Men entourage would be quite stupid. So Lorna decided that it would be for the best if she left the group. Her then-boyfriend, Iceman, was vehemently opposed to the idea, but in the end, he complied. The one who decided to accompany her was Havoc, her ex-boyfriend, much to Iceman's chagrin. But their journey away from the X-Men was not easy. Right when Polaris and Havoc decided to go, they were chased by the dangerous Leper Queen and the Sapien League, which were infamous for their hatred towards mutants. While on the run, Havoc and Lorna came across Dap, an alien creature who only Lorna seemed to understand. For some unknown reason, Lorna felt drawn towards the creature like she had to befriend him. Apparently, Lorna had never heard about stranger danger. Havoc, however, did know about stranger danger, and he tried to stop her. But before he could, the creature grabbed Lorna and took off. For Lorna, it was back to being kidnapped again. This creature dropped Lorna right into Apocalypse's lair. There, Apocalypse promised to give her the powers she missed oh so dearly if she decided to join his ranks as Pestilence, one of his 4 horsemen. At first, Polaris refused, but eventually she agreed to it. Apocalypse injected some unknown technology into her system and infused her body with it to replicate her long-lost powers. With her memories wiped, Lorna decided to go to the World Health Organization and started taking as many viruses, bacteria and fungi as she could in order to create a mega plague. This outbreak would pretty much affect everyone on Earth, and only Apocalypse would have the antidote for it. He would offer this antidote to only 10% of the population, and the rest of the world would die off. This was the amazing plan that Apocalypse came up with. Talk about aggressive population control. The X-Men learned about Pestilence's visit to the World Health Organization and arrived there to stop her. Amidst the fight, Wolverine managed to put Pestilence in a chokehold, and that's when they found out that it was actually Lorna. Havoc, who had a serum that acted as an antidote for all the diseases she had come into contact with, gave it to her. But despite seemingly healing, there was something wrong with this woman. She didn't want to stay there at the X-Mansion and instead took off in the middle of the night to find Apocalypse. Havoc and the new X-Men team went after her and saved her from an anti-Apocalypse cult. After this incident, Polaris decided to join the X-Men again and leave Apocalypse's side for good. After she returned, Emma Frost noticed that Lorna's powers were mutating thanks to the unknown technology Apocalypse introduced into her system. How does her cyberpathy work? As we've mentioned, Polaris has the ability to manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum. This allows her to do a myriad of things. One such handy-dandy thing that she can do is feel around computers. Lorna can use her ability to manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum and goes inside the computers to manipulate them according to her will. We saw it in use on a few occasions. When she was a young girl, she would use this power of hers to change the grades she got in an exam. Later, when she needed to betray the Inner Circle, a group of mutants who used to run the terrorist organization known as the Hellfire Club, she used this power to hack into Sage's computer and learn whatever she needed to learn about the Mutant Underground, a mutant control resistance group against Sentinel services. Does she have a cybernetic eye? There are a lot of multinational corporations that have everything they need to control a group of mutants at any given time. Harry Snow was a scientist who used to be a part of Alchemax, a chemical company. Eventually, he became the CEO of Serval Industries, a multifaceted corporation that started off as a search engine. Think of Google, but now Google owns everything from toilet paper to houses. Well, maybe that future isn't too far away from us, but that's a whole different conversation. Now, Harry thought that if the countries and the United Nations itself could have their very own superhero teams, then why would corporations that control the economy to a large part not? So he purchased the rights to the X-Factor name from Jameer Madrox. After this, he recruited Polaris to be a part of the team. But just having a team wasn't enough. Henry fitted Polaris's right eye with a cybernetic nanobot. He did so to make sure he could see everything that Polaris was doing, just to ensure that he had an idea about his superhero team. While this started off as a security measure, it sure delved into being creepy in no time. Bad idea, Harry. Her body was possessed by Malice. In her entire tenure as a superhero, Lorna has gone through a lot of bad things. Apart from being repeatedly kidnapped and getting a cybernetic eye, which I assume was forced upon her to a degree, Lorna was also overtaken by an evil being. Yes, we're talking about Malice. This evil being that often showed up on its victim's neck as a gothic collar became a staple for a while when Lorna would show up in the comics. When Lorna was seeing off Alex, the Marauders attacked her, and Malice latched onto her. The bond that in turn was created was extremely strong, almost making them one entity. Lorna, as Malice, tried to kill Cyclops' wife and caused a lot of mayhem. Malice tried to leave Lorna once, but he was informed by Mr. Sinister that its union with Lorna was planned. This was so that their power sets fuse so much that it gets next to impossible for them to be separated. Mr. Sinister eventually left a psychic trail hoping to ambush the X-Men, and sure enough, it worked. However, during the fight that followed, an unchecked optic blast from Cyclops seemingly killed Mr. Sinister, which resulted in Malice's hold on Polaris to weaken. Right after that, she was kidnapped by Zaladine, and you know what happened after that. Does she have any weakness? No matter how strong one is physically, if one's mental fortitude is lacking, it's incredibly easy to take down that person. This stands extremely true for both the father and the daughter. Just like her dad, Lorna has a propensity for mental illnesses. On more than one occasion, Lorna has had an episode that has completely left her a mess. She suffered a great deal from depression and anxiety, along with several heartbreaking mental breakdowns. The poor girl has gone through a lot, and this is the only weakness that's stopping her from achieving greatness. Lorna has the potential to be the best at what she does, but with her mental vulnerabilities, she could never imagine herself accomplishing that, which, in a self-fulfilling prophecy way, ends up becoming the reality. Marvelous verdict. Lorna Dane is an overall interesting character. Ever since her first appearance, she's struck a chord in the fans' hearts, and rightfully so. She's relatable with her flaws and self-doubt, and when she pushes through those and becomes the best that we know she can be, the satisfaction is extremely soothing. This geophysicist with a career as a superhero on the side is definitely someone worth looking into, and we hope we managed to pique your curiosity about her journey, in case this is the first time you've ever heard about her. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.